I used to believe my life was ordinary, stable even. At 32, I had a steady job as a marketing consultant, a cozy apartment in the city, and a marriage that, from the outside, looked almost enviable. Friends would often say, "You two are the perfect couple." I would smile and nod, even when deep inside I knew things weren't as flawless as they seemed. My wife, Laura, and I had been together for nearly 8 years, married for 5. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and built our lives side by side. She was kind, ambitious, and beautiful in a way that wasn't flashy but effortless. People liked her instantly. I did too. But routines have a way of dulling sharp emotions. What once felt like passion slowly settled into habit. We had our dinner rituals, our weekend grocery trips, our carefully planned vacations. It was comfortable, yes, but comfort can be dangerous. It numbs you, makes you stop asking questions about what you really want, or whether you're still truly happy. For a long time, I convinced myself that this was what adulthood was supposed to feel like. That the butterflies of early love were meant to fade. That a stable marriage was built on compromise and routines. And yet, every time I caught myself staring at the ceiling at night while Laura slept beside me, I couldn't silence that quiet voice whispering, "Is this all there is?" The fracture began to show in small ways. Laura worked long hours as a corporate lawyer, often coming home past 9, drained and irritable. I tried to be supportive, but our conversations grew shorter, our silences longer. We still loved each other, or at least I thought we did, but something vital was slipping through our fingers, and neither of us seemed willing to grab hold of it. I remember one particular evening, sitting alone at our kitchen table. Laura had texted me she'd be late again, stuck in another endless meeting. The food I cooked sat cooling on the counter, untouched. I poured myself a second glass of wine, scrolling absently through my phone. That's when I stumbled upon a message from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Julia. At first, it was nothing, a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" But that simple message would become the spark that reignited feelings I thought I had buried long ago. Feelings that would lead me down a path I never expected to take. Looking back, that night was the beginning of everything. The love, the lies, the betrayal. The story I'm about to tell isn't one I'm proud of, but it's mine. And maybe by telling it, I'll finally make sense of how an ordinary life unraveled into something I never imagined. Julia's message lingered in my mind long after I read it. It was late, and I sat staring at my phone, rereading the simple line, "Hey, how have you been?" 8 words that felt like a doorway into another life, another version of me I hadn't thought about in years. Julia and I had met in college around the same time I met Laura. Back then, Julia was wild, impulsive, the kind of woman who lit up a room with her laugh. We never dated seriously, though there had been chemistry, moments stolen at parties, late-night talks, almost kisses. But life pulled us in different directions. She moved abroad for a while, then vanished from my circle entirely. And now, suddenly, here she was again, appearing like a ghost from the past. I hesitated before replying. Part of me knew it was harmless, just a casual reconnection. Another part whispered warnings I wasn't ready to hear. Still, I typed back, "Hey Julia, been a long time. I'm good, married now, living in the city. How about you?" Her response came quickly. "Married, huh? Time flies. I'm back in town after years overseas. Thought I'd reach out to some old friends. We should catch up sometime." I told myself it was innocent. Old friends catching up. Nothing more. But that night, when Laura finally came home, exhausted and barely glancing at me before collapsing on the couch, I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. Loneliness, maybe, or the sharp contrast between the warmth in Julia's message and the cold silence in my own living room. Over the next few days, Julia and I exchanged messages. At first light and casual, work updates, memories of college, small jokes. But slowly they deepened. She asked about my marriage, and though I brushed off the cracks, she seemed to sense them. I asked about her life abroad, and she painted vivid pictures of places I had never seen, adventures I had never dared to take. With each conversation, I felt a part of me waking up, a part one didn't even realize had been asleep. One evening, Laura and I sat at the dinner table, eating in silence. She scrolled through her phone between bites, answering work emails. I tried to start a conversation. "How was your day?" I asked. "Busy," she muttered without looking up. "Anything interesting happen?" She sighed, finally putting her phone down. "Does it matter? It's the same every day."
Meeting, client, deadline.
"Can we just not talk about work for once?" I nodded, but the sting of her dismissal lingered. I realized then that I craved something more than just companionship. I craved to be seen, to be heard. And in Julia's messages, I found exactly that. The first time we decided to meet, it felt almost reckless. We chose a quiet cafe downtown, far from the places Laura and I usually went. I told myself it was harmless, that it was just coffee with an old friend. But deep down, I knew the line I was about to cross, even if it wasn't physical yet. When I walked into the cafe and saw Julia sitting there, smiling at me like no time had passed, my heart skipped. She looked older, yes, but in a way that made her even more striking. There was a confidence in her eyes, a spark I hadn't seen in anyone for years. "Wow," she said as I sat down. "You haven't changed much." I laughed, nervous. "I could say the same about you." We talked for nearly 2 hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly. It was as if the years apart had melted away. When we finally stood to leave, she hugged me. Longer than necessary, warmer than appropriate. On the way home, guilt gnawed at me, but alongside it, another feeling grew stronger. Excitement. For the first time in years, I felt alive. And that terrified me. I told myself I wouldn't see Julia again. After that first meeting, the guilt followed me like a shadow. I lay in bed beside Laura that night, staring at the ceiling while she slept, her breathing steady and distant. My phone was on the nightstand, buzzing softly with a new message. I didn't need to look. I knew it was Julia, and I gave in. "I had a great time today. It felt like old times," she wrote. I typed back, hesitating before hitting send. "Yeah, me too." From then on, our conversations became more frequent, more personal. She'd ask about my day in a way Laura never did anymore. She'd listen, laugh at my jokes, remind me of parts of myself I thought were gone. It wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. Julia saw me, or at least the version of me I wanted to believe still existed. One Friday evening, after another long week of Laura working late, Julia suggested we meet again. "Nothing fancy," she said. "Just a drink. Friends do that, right? Friends." The word was safe, but the way she said it carried an unspoken challenge. We met at a dimly lit bar downtown. I arrived early, ordered a whiskey, and tried to steady my nerves. When Julia walked in, every head seemed to turn. She wore a simple black dress, nothing extravagant, but it clung to her in a way that left no room for innocence. "You look incredible," I blurted before I could stop myself. She smiled knowingly. "You don't look so bad yourself." The drinks flowed, the conversation deepened, and soon we weren't talking about college or work anymore. We talked about loneliness, about unfulfilled dreams, about the lives we thought we'd have by now. At one point, she leaned closer, her hand brushing mine on the table. "You ever wonder," she whispered, "what life would have been like if things had gone differently back then?" My throat went dry. I knew exactly what she meant. I should have pulled away, reminded her, and myself that I was married. Instead, I let the question hang between us, heavy and dangerous. When we finally left the bar, the night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. We stood outside, neither of us moving. She looked at me with those familiar, burning eyes. "This is wrong," I muttered, half to her, half to myself. "Then why does it feel so right?" she replied softly. Before I knew it, her lips were on mine. The kiss was brief, almost restrained, but it sent a shock through me, igniting something I had been starving for. I pulled away, heart pounding. "Julia, I can't." She smiled sadly, touching my cheek. "I know. You're married. But don't tell me you didn't feel that." Couldn't, because I had. That night, I went home and found Laura asleep on the couch, her laptop still open, emails filling the screen. I stood there, watching her, feeling the weight of betrayal settle on my chest. I hadn't slept with Julia, not yet, but in my heart, I knew the line had already been crossed. And once crossed, it's nearly impossible to go back. After that kiss, nothing was the same. I told myself I would stop, that it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But temptation has a way of whispering louder than reason. Every time Julia's name lit up my phone, my heart raced in a way it hadn't in years. Laura remained busy, her life consumed by work. We spoke less and less, and when we did, our words felt mechanical, questions about bills, schedules, groceries. She didn't notice the changes in me, or if she did, she pretended not to. Sometimes I wondered if she was relieved that I had stopped asking for her attention. Julia, on the other hand, gave me everything Laura didn't. She texted me in the morning just to ask if I'd slept well. She remembered small details from our college days, things even I had forgotten. And when we met again, because of course we did, it was in secret, in places where no one would recognize us. The first time we crossed the line fully, it was in a hotel room on the outskirts of the city. I remember standing at the door, hesitating as she swiped the keycard and pushed it open. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and fresh linen, but beneath that was the electric tension between us. "We don't have to do this," I said, though my voice betrayed me. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "Do you want to leave?" I should have said yes. I should have walked away. Instead, I pulled her into my arms, and all the guilt, all the fear, drowned in a flood of desire. The hours we spent in that room blurred into something unreal. For the first time in years, I felt alive, wanted, consumed. But when it was over and I drove home, the guilt returned heavier than ever. Laura was already asleep, her laptop open beside her. I kissed her forehead, and she stirred slightly, murmuring something incoherent. The innocence of that moment cut deeper than any blade. Yet I couldn't stop. One meeting turned into another. We created excuses. Late nights at work, sudden errands, catching up with friends. Julia and I became experts at lying, at carving secret spaces out of ordinary days. Every kiss, every touch was both exhilarating and terrifying. There were moments of pure joy. The way Julia laughed when I told her stories. The way she'd hold my hand in the dark, as if we were the only two people in the world. But there were also moments of crushing guilt, like when Laura surprised me with tickets to a concert she knew I loved. I sat beside her that night, pretending to enjoy it, but all I could think about was the hotel room where Julia was waiting for me the next evening. I lived two lives. One in the daylight, where I was the devoted husband, the man with responsibilities. Another in the shadows, where I was reckless, consumed by passion, unable to let go. And with every lie I told, the distance between who I was and who I pretended to be grew wider. I knew it couldn't last forever, but I didn't know how or when. It would all come crashing down. The longer it went on, the heavier it became. At first, the thrill of secrecy was intoxicating, the rush of stolen hours, the adrenaline of lying and not getting caught. But as weeks turned into months, the excitement slowly gave way to a gnawing anxiety I couldn't escape. I woke up every morning with Laura beside me, guilt pressing down on my chest like a weight. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me across the breakfast table, her eyes searching mine as if she knew something wasn't right. She never asked, never confronted me, but I felt her suspicion in the quiet spaces between us. Meanwhile, Julia wanted more. She never said it outright, but I saw it in her eyes when I rushed out of her apartment to get home before Laura noticed. I heard it in her voice when she asked, "When will we stop sneaking around?" I'd brush off her questions with vague promises, telling her we had time, that things would make sense eventually. But the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. I loved Julia, or at least, I loved how she made me feel. Alive, desired, important. With her, I wasn't just a husband lost in routine. I was a man worth chasing. Yet at the same time, I couldn't imagine life without Laura. She had been my partner for nearly a decade, the person who knew me better than anyone. Despite the distance between us, despite the cold silences, there was still a bond one couldn't sever. And so, I lived in limbo, torn between two worlds, two women, two versions of myself. The lies piled up. I told Laura I was working late when I was really with Julia. I invented business trips, dinners with clients, excuses so elaborate I sometimes lost track of them. Every time my phone buzzed, panic flared in my chest. What if Laura saw the messages? What if I slipped up? One evening, the tension nearly broke me. I was at Julia's place, lying beside her, when my phone rang. It was Laura. My heart stopped. "Don't answer," Julia whispered, running her fingers down my chest. But I did. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Where are you?" Laura asked. Her voice was calm, too calm. "At the office. I'll be late. Don't wait up." There was a pause. Then, "Okay. Love you." The words sliced through me like a knife. I hung up quickly, my hands trembling. Julia studied me silently, her expression unreadable. "You can't keep this up forever," she said finally. "One day she's going to find out." I knew she was right. The double life was unsustainable. Every lie was a crack in the foundation, and sooner or later the whole thing would collapse. But I wasn't ready to choose. I wasn't ready to lose either of them. And so I clung to both even as the walls closed in. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there all along. The subtle questions, the lingering looks, the way Laura would suddenly cancel plans without explanation. But I convinced myself I was careful, that my double life was hidden well enough. It started with small things. She'd ask, "Did you really work late yesterday?" Or, "Who was that on the phone this morning?" My heart would hammer in my chest as I replied with vague answers, claiming clients, colleagues, deadlines. Each time, her eyes searched mine, trying to see through the cracks in my carefully constructed lies. One Saturday, it all unraveled. Laura came home early from a law seminar, unannounced. I was at Julia's apartment, running my hands through my hair, staring at the clock, panicking. My phone buzzed, Laura calling again. I ignored it, hoping she'd assume I was busy. But she didn't leave. She knocked on the door, and before I could even react, there was a sharp knock and a voice I could never forget. "Open this door." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. There was no hiding. She knew, or at least she suspected. When I opened the door, Laura's expression was calm, but her eyes burned with something I hadn't seen before. Betrayal. "I knew," she said simply. "What?" I stammered. She stepped inside, scanning the apartment as if confirming her worst fears. "Don't lie to me. I've been watching you for months. The late nights, the distant moods. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew something was wrong." My throat went dry. "Laura, you're with her, aren't you?" Her voice wasn't angry, at least not yet. It was quieter, colder. The kind of calm that terrifies because it hides a storm. I nodded, unable to speak. Every excuse, every justification I'd rehearsed in my head, fell apart. She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. "How long?" "Months," I whispered. "I never meant." "Never meant?" She cut me off sharply. "You meant every second, didn't you? You chose this. Not by accident, not by mistake. You chose her over me, over us." I had no words. The weight of my actions pressed down like 1,000 bricks. I wanted to reach for her, to explain, to apologize, but she recoiled. The distance between us that had been growing over the years suddenly became a chasm too wide to cross. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said finally, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I even want to try." And just like that, the fragile life I had built, 2 loves, 2 secrets, 1 carefully constructed reality, crumbled in an instant. I looked at her, at the woman I had promised to spend my life with, and realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Julia had given me excitement, passion, escape, but Laura gave me history, intimacy, a life intertwined with mine. And now, because of my choices, I was about to lose both. The days after Laura confronted me were unbearable. Our apartment felt colder, the silence louder. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, trying to avoid her gaze, while she stayed distant, locked in her own thoughts. We were in the same space, but the invisible wall between us had hardened into something impossible to ignore. We argued, of course, inevitably. Every small detail became a battleground. I tried to explain, to justify, to beg for forgiveness. She listened, her face a mask of controlled fury. "You think words can fix this?" she asked one evening, her voice breaking. "You've lied to me for months. You've built a whole life behind my back. Do you even understand what that means?" "I know I've made mistakes," I said, my voice hoarse. "I never wanted to hurt you. I don't know, lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. And Julia." She reminded me of something I'd forgotten. "That's no excuse," she shouted. "Do you hear yourself? You chose someone else over me, over us." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the truth was undeniable. I had chosen her repeatedly, and now the consequences were unavoidable. Meanwhile, Julia sensed the shift too. She knew Laura had discovered the affair. I could feel it in her texts, the subtle changes in tone, the questions that hinted at fear and doubt. She didn't pressure me to leave Laura, but she wanted me fully, in a way I was no longer able to give. Caught between them, I felt my world crumble. Each conversation, each encounter, was like walking on a tightrope over a chasm of my own making. I was trying to hold onto two things that couldn't coexist. One night, Laura confronted me again. This time, there were tears in her eyes, rage in her voice, and despair I had never seen before. "How do you expect me to trust you again? How do you expect me to even look at you the same way?" I reached for her, but she pushed me back. The distance felt unbearable. I don't know," I admitted, feeling smaller than I had in years. "I'm so sorry. I don't want to lose you." Her eyes softened, just slightly, but the pain was still there. "You've already lost me, in ways you can't fix. You have to decide. Who do you want to be with? Me or her?" I didn't answer. How could I? Choosing one meant destroying the other. Choosing both had already destroyed us all. For the first time, I realized that my actions had consequences far beyond stolen kisses and secret meetings. They had shattered trust, broken hearts, and left scars that might never heal. The more I tried to balance my life between Laura and Julia, the more impossible it became. I felt like a tightrope walker, teetering over a void, knowing that one misstep would send everything crashing down. Every glance from Laura, every touch from Julia reminded me of what I had and what I was risking. Julia wanted commitment, not the kind of secret, stolen hours we shared, but a real public devotion. She would talk about moving in together, planning trips, imagining a life that didn't include Laura. I listened, trapped by desire, unable to tell her the truth. I wasn't ready to abandon the life I had built, even if it was fractured. Laura, on the other hand, tried to reclaim what we had. She was quieter now, more deliberate. She didn't nag or shout. She tried to make me see her as a partner again, to remind me of the life we had together before I let it slip away. But every time she reached out, I felt the weight of my betrayal pressing against me, making intimacy feel tainted. I started lying to both of them more brazenly, juggling schedules and inventing excuses. But no lie could erase the growing tension, the sense that the end was coming. The house I had built between two women was crumbling, and I was standing in the middle, powerless to stop it. One evening, Julia called me, her voice strained. "I can't do this anymore. I can't live in the shadows. You have to choose or I'm gone." Her words were like a slap in the face. I wanted to explain, to stall, to say anything that would keep her with me. But I knew she was right. I had to choose. At the same time, Laura confronted me in a way I couldn't ignore. "I'm not asking you to choose between us for my sake," she said softly, almost pleading. "I'm asking you to decide for yourself, because the person who does this, who can live a lie every day, that's not the man I married. And I want him back, or I want to let him go." I felt trapped between two worlds, both of which I loved and both of which I was destroying by staying in the middle. My heart ached for Julia's freedom, for Laura's forgiveness. I wanted both, but life doesn't give second chances like that. The nights became sleepless, my thoughts a relentless storm. I imagined scenarios, weighed options, played out conversations 100 times in my head. Every choice seemed impossible. Choosing Julia meant abandoning the history, the intimacy, the life I had with Laura. Choosing Laura meant crushing Julia, the woman who made me feel alive in ways I hadn't realized I had forgotten. And yet, the decision had to be made. The triangle could not sustain itself. I was the axis on which everything turned, and my indecision had already caused enough damage. I knew one choice would define me, and perhaps the other choice would haunt me forever. I reached my breaking point one rainy night. The sky outside mirrored the chaos inside me. Dark, stormy, relentless. Julia had texted me earlier. "We need to talk. Tonight." I knew what that meant, and my chest tightened. At the same time, Laura was waiting for me at home, her expression unreadable, her eyes heavy with unshed tears. I had tried to delay the inevitable, to stall for one more hour, one more day, but the truth demanded to be faced. The triangle I had nurtured in secrecy had grown too heavy, and it was collapsing around me. I met Julia first in the hotel where everything had begun. She looked radiant, but her eyes held a storm I had seen before. Anger, fear, and heartbreak all entwined. "You have to choose," she said, voice trembling. "I can't live in this half-life with you anymore. You either want me or you don't. Decide." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Every possible choice felt like a betrayal. Choosing her meant severing the years I had with Laura, ripping apart the foundation of my past. And yet, letting her go felt like losing a part of my soul I hadn't even realized was missing. That night, I didn't have the courage to answer. We parted with a heavy silence, the tension between us unresolved, unrelenting. Driving home, the rain soaked my clothes, but I barely felt it. My mind was consumed with Laura, waiting in the apartment, waiting for me to return and reveal the truth I had delayed for so long. When I walked through the door, she didn't greet me. She stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the city lights. I could feel the weight of her judgment even before I spoke. "I need to know," she said quietly. "Do you want to be with me or her?" The words hung in the room like a guillotine blade. I looked at Laura, at the woman I had promised to love, and felt a surge of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. I looked at Julia's text still on my phone, her name flashing like a beacon I couldn't ignore. And then it hit me. There was no simple answer. Any choice I made would hurt someone, possibly destroy both relationships, and leave me hollow in the end. The reality of my actions, the consequences of months of deceit, were unavoidable. I had created a storm, and now I was standing at the eye of it, powerless to control what came next. I realized that passion alone couldn't save me. Desire couldn't undo betrayal. And love, real love, required more than the fleeting thrill of secret meetings and whispered promises. It required honesty, courage, and sacrifice. But I had squandered those chances. And now, whatever decision I made, the damage was already done.